Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a tale of a merchant and a poor man.
Right. A Tale of a Merchant and a Poor Man by Rabbi נחman of Breslov. And it was actually a story that one of you shared with us, so thank you so much for that. This story is jam-packed with interesting characters, unexpected twists.
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right in. I think to start, it's worth noting this real stark difference in fortune between our main characters.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about the way this story's set up. Right from the beginning, you have this wealthy merchant living in the same town as this desperately poor man.
And neither of them, despite their, differences, neither one has children.
Right.
So that detail, it seems like, I don't know, simple, but could it hint at something deeper?
I think so. I mean, it definitely highlights how their stories are connected from the start. Childlessness is something they share despite their totally different social standings. And then the merchant, he has this dream, really vivid and unsettling. He sees everything he owns, all his possessions, his wealth, it's all being packed up and taken away. And he asks where it's all going, and he's told it's going to the poor man.
It's like a nightmare.
It is, but, it's just a dream. But it really sticks with him.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating. It shows how much our subconscious can affect us, even when we're awake, Like this dream really gets to him, even though he knows it wasn't real.
Totally. So before the dream, he was actually charitable to the poor man and his wife.
Oh, interesting.
But afterwards, he's totally different whenever they come around. He's visibly bothered.
Like it's changed their whole relationship.
It really has. It's like the dream created this new reality for him. Okay, but then here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The poor man's wife, she visits the merchant. And she notices how troubled he is. She's pretty sharp, right?
Yeah, very perceptive.
And she asks him, what's wrong?
Bold move.
It is. And he actually confides in her.
Oh, wow. He tells her about the dream.
He tells her about the dream. I mean, what does that say about him that he would share something so personal?
I think it shows how much he needs to talk to someone about it. He's really struggling with this.
Right. And then get this.
What?
She tells him that she had a dream too, that very same night.
No way.
Yes. And in her dream, she was the wealthy one.
Oh, wow.
And her fortune was going to him, the merchant. I mean, come on, a shared dream. What are the chances?
That's wild. You have to wonder if it's some kind of destiny thing.
Exactly. It's like they're connected in a way that goes beyond just living in the same town.
It's like their fortunes are linked somehow.
So then the merchant's wife, she's out for a carriage ride with friends, and the poor man's wife is with them. Suddenly this big military officer passes by, a Yadnaral, the story calls him, and he just orders one of the women to be brought to him. And it's the poor man's wife that gets taken.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a brutal turn of events.
That's awful. He just takes her away.
Just like that.
It really shows how vulnerable people were back then, especially if you were poor.
Right. And the poor man is just devastated. He just mourns and mourns. And the merchant, he hears this grief.
Yeah.
And he's totally moved by it. It's like he can't stand to see this man suffer.
Remember how he was uncomfortable with the poor man after the dream?
I know. But now he's completely changed.
So what does he do?
What he does is crazy. He goes to the Yadnaral's country, finds the Yadnaral's house.
Wait, so he's going to try to get her back?
He is. He just walks right past the guards like he's invisible, finds the poor man's wife, wakes her up, and they flee.
I mean, that's incredibly brave, but also super reckless.
It is. Of course, it doesn't go unnoticed. So they're on the run now.
So where do they hide?
They end up in a pit filled with rainwater.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah, for 2 days. 2 days. Imagine that.
Must have been awful.
It was. And it's in this pit, in that awful situation, that the poor man's wife makes a vow. A vow. She says that any good fortune she has from then on, she'll share it with him, the merchant. Even all of it if he wants.
Yeah.
And she swears this vow using the pit as her witness.
Wow.
I know, right? I mean, it's like she's so moved by what he did for her, she's willing to give him everything.
Makes you think about how our experiences can really change our perspective,
For sure. So their escape continues. And it's incredible. They hide in 7 different water sources.
7.
7. The pit, a mikveh.
A mikveh.
A mikveh.
Yeah.
Then lakes, springs, streams, rivers.
Wow.
And finally the seas. And at each one, she renews her vow, using that place as her witness.
What do you think is the significance of water here? Why all these different water sources?
I mean, water often represents Cleansing, change, renewal. It's essential for life, right?
Right.
Maybe it's symbolizing their journey, their hardship, and how it's changing them.
And the mikveh, that's interesting too. It's a ritual bath, right? Adds this whole other layer of meaning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally, the merchant. He uses his knowledge of sea routes to get them back to their home country.
He does.
He does. He returns the poor man's wife to her husband. I mean, can you imagine the joy?
Oh, that must have been incredible.
It was. But here's where things get even more interesting. As a result of everything he's been through, the merchant has a son born that very year.
Wow.
And the poor man's wife, well, she gives birth to a daughter, but not just any daughter. This daughter is described as incredibly beautiful.
Beautiful? Like how?
Like unbelievably beautiful, like nothing anyone has ever seen before.
Okay, now that's interesting.
Right. It's like this daughter's beauty is like a turning point in their story.
And it's connected to what they all went through. It's almost like a reward.
Exactly. And so the merchant, he starts thinking about the daughter and his son, and he thinks, what if this is how the dream comes true?
Through marriage.
Through marriage. Not some magical transfer of wealth, but through a union of their children.
It makes sense.
It does. So he proposes this to the poor man's wife.
And what does she say?
She says she was thinking the same thing, but she was hesitant to bring it up.
So she agrees.
She agrees. She remembers her vow.
It all seems to be falling into place.
It does, but of course there's a twist.
There's always a twist.
Always a twist. So the daughter, with her amazing beauty, she attracts a lot of attention.
I bet.
Noblemen, you know. Even a prince wants to marry her.
Oh, wow. So now it's not just a simple arrangement between two families.
Right. The stakes are much higher now. So the poor man, he wants to be worthy of the prince.
Right.
Right.
Makes sense.
So he joins the emperor's service, rises through the ranks, and before you know it, he's the admiral himself.
Whoa, hold on. A Yadmiral? Like the guy who took his wife?
The very same. Like what goes around comes around.
It's crazy how life works out sometimes.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So now he's got nobles lining up for his daughter's hand.
Yeah.
But what about the agreement with the merchant?
Right, you can't just ignore that.
Exactly. But this guy, he's ambitious. He keeps getting promoted, leads the emperor's armies to victory.
He's on a roll.
He is. And then, get this, the emperor dies. And guess who they choose as the new emperor?
No way! The poor man!
The poor man. He's gone from, like, the bottom to the very top.
So what about the merchant's son?
Well, now that he's emperor, he issues this decree that his daughter can't marry a common merchant. It's a total betrayal.
Oh, man. But what about his wife?
The empress. She remembers her vow. She wants to keep her word.
So what does she do?
It's tough. She can't openly defy her husband, the emperor, but she finds ways to secretly support the merchant, making sure he doesn't fall into complete poverty.
That's incredible. She's really sticking to her principles.
She is. But the emperor, he's still thinking about his daughter's marriage.
Right, and the merchant's son is still a problem.
A problem. So he comes up with this plan to get rid of him, fabricates accusations, gets him sentenced to death.
Yes, how?
They're going to throw him in the sea in a sack.
Oh, that's awful.
It is. But the empress, she hears about this. And she's heartbroken.
Does she do anything?
She does. She can't openly challenge her husband, but she secretly pleads with the people who are supposed to carry out the sentence.
She does.
She does. And she convinces them to switch the merchant's son with another prisoner who was already condemned.
So he escapes.
He escapes. But before they do the switch, she tells her daughter everything. Everything. About the merchant, the dream, the vow, the hiding places. She makes her daughter promise to only marry the merchant's son.
Wow, she's really taking charge.
She is. And the daughter, she's a good person, she agrees. She even sends the merchant's son a letter in prison telling him about her promise and drawing a little map of the 7 hiding places, telling him to keep it safe.
That's smart. A map of the hiding places is like a secret code.
Exactly. So the merchant's son escapes, eventually boards a ship, but then a storm hits, and he's shipwrecked on this deserted island.
Poor guy. He can't catch a break.
I know. He explores the island and finds this nice little spot with food and water, and he decides to stay there, living a simple life.
So he's just given up.
Maybe. Or maybe he's just found a different kind of peace. Meanwhile, back in the capital, the emperor thinks the merchant's son is dead, so he starts planning these elaborate weddings for his daughter.
Trying to find her a king.
Trying to find her a king. But the princess, she's clever. She comes up with this test for her suitors.
A test.
A test. They have to come to this specific spot and recite a love poem.
Interesting.
Right. And she responds to each one, sometimes directly, sometimes through her attendants.
Right.
But she always ends with the same phrase. But you have not passed through the water.
You have not passed through the waters. What does that even mean?
No one knows. It's like a riddle. And some of these kings, they become obsessed with her. Some even get sick from wanting her so badly.
It's like a curse. It's like a curse.
But they keep coming, trying to win her hand.
Driven by her beauty and the power she represents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all this time, the merchant's son, he's on this island, making music, writing poetry. And he keeps looking at the letter from the princess.
The one with the map.
The one with the map. It's all he has left of her.
So sad.
It is.
Yeah.
And then another disaster. A huge storm comes and destroys the tree where he hid the letter.
He loses the letter.
He loses the letter. It's gone. He's devastated. It's like he's lost his last connection to her.
So now what?
He decides to leave the island. He travels to a nearby town, hears about the emperor and the beautiful princess, and he knows he has to try to reach her.
How?
He goes to the king of this town, tells him his whole story, about the 7 waters, the vow, everything, and he offers the king a deal. Woo the princess for him, and he'll pay him handsomely.
He's putting all his faith in this king.
He is. And the crazy thing is, the king believes him.
So the king agrees.
He agrees. But then, plot twist, he doesn't want the merchant's son around, competing with him.
What does he do?
He sends him away to a faraway land.
Oh, no. Another betrayal.
Another betrayal. And this happens not once, but twice more. He goes to 2 other kings, tells them his story, offers even more proof, even more specific details.
And they all betray him.
They all betray him. Each one sends him further and further away. It's heartbreaking.
I know. Poor guy just can't catch a break.
I know. So the first king, he goes to the princess, uses the 7 hiding places in his poem, but he gets the order wrong. Wrong. He just couldn't make it work with his poem's rhythm.
So close, yet so far.
Right. The princess hears those places and thinks, maybe this is him. But then the order's wrong and she's not so sure anymore.
Smart girl.
She is. But she tentatively agrees to marry him. They start planning the wedding.
But then the second king shows up.
Exactly. Second king arrives, not bothered that she's supposedly engaged. He recites his poem, gets the order right, even adds an extra detail that no one else knows.
So now she's really confused.
Really confused. And then the third king shows up. He's got even more specific details, shows her a drawing of the 7 hiding places.
How do they all know this stuff?
Right. It's a mystery. Finally, she's had enough. She says she won't believe anyone unless they bring her the letter. The letter from the merchant's son, in his own handwriting.
The letter with the map.
The letter with the map. It's the only way she'll know for sure.
Makes sense.
So the merchant's son, he hears about all this, and he's done being sent away. He decides to go himself.
He does.
He does. He goes to the princess, recites his poem, tells her everything, even details from their childhood that no one else could know. But she still asks for the letter.
And he doesn't have it.
He doesn't have it. So he gives up. He goes back to his deserted island, resigned to his fate.
So sad. After all that, he still can't reach her.
I know. But then a new character enters the story. A robber.
A robber. What's he doing here?
Well, he hears about the beautiful princess and how rich she is.
Yeah.
He's a eunuch, so he doesn't want to marry her himself, but he wants to capture her and sell her.
Oh, no. This doesn't sound good.
It's not. This guy, he's really clever. He comes up with this whole plan.
What kind of plan?
He buys a ton of fancy goods, builds these golden birds that look and sound real, like they can sing and fly. He pretends to be a wealthy merchant and sails to the princess's city.
This guy is good.
He is. He trades there for months, builds up his reputation, and then the princess, she hears about him and his amazing goods.
And she wants to buy some.
She wants to buy some. She sends for him, but he refuses to come to her.
Bold move.
Very bold. So she decides to go to him, veiled, with her attendants and guards.
Risky.
Very risky. She goes to his ship, makes some purchases, and he keeps tempting her back with promises of even more amazing things.
So she keeps going back.
She does. And then, one day, he takes her to see the golden birds, keeps her guards out, locks her in the room, and throws her in a sack.
He kidnaps her.
Kidnaps her.
Yeah.
He takes her clothes, puts them on one of his sailors, covers the sailor's face, and sends him out.
So they think the princess is still on the ship?
Exactly. He's a real mastermind. He knows he'll be chased, so he hides with the princess in a pit filled with rainwater.
Not another pit.
Another pit. And he threatens her, tells her not to scream. He's willing to die if he loses her.
Sounds desperate.
He is. He's come too far. And then, you won't believe this,
What?
he takes her to all 7 of the water sources where her mother and the merchant hid.
No way.
It's crazy, right? Like, he's following in their footsteps, but for all the wrong reasons.
It's like a twisted version of their journey.
It is. Finally, they reach the sea, find a small boat, and set sail. He disguises the princess as a boy, hoping to sell her somewhere far away.
And then
Another storm. Their boat is wrecked on the same deserted island where the merchant's son is living.
it's like fate is playing with them.
It is. So the robber and the princess, they split up to find food, but she deliberately stays away from him. He can't find her and probably dies on the island.
So the princess is alone again.
Alone again. And meanwhile, back in the capital, the empress is grieving for her daughter.
Of course.
She blames the emperor, they fight constantly. Eventually, he gets so angry he banishes her.
He banishes his own wife.
He does. And after that, everything starts going wrong for him. He loses battles, makes bad decisions, fires all his advisors.
Sounds like he's lost it.
He has. The people see this, and they decide to take action. They banish the emperor and bring back the empress.
So she's the ruler now.
She's the ruler. The first thing she does is send for the merchant and his wife and brings them to live in the palace.
Well, for her.
Right. So the emperor, he's been banished. He's wandering around. And guess where he ends up?
The deserted island.
The deserted island.
Yeah.
Years have passed. Everyone looks different. He runs into his daughter and the merchant's son, but none of them recognize each other.
Oh, wow. This is getting complicated.
I know. They all start living together, sharing food, playing music together.
That's sweet, in a way.
It is. And then, one day, the emperor asks the merchant's son if he's heard of the, former emperor.
Oh, yeah.
And the son says yes. And then he gets really angry, calls the emperor a murderer.
Not knowing it's him.
Not knowing it's him. He tells him about all the terrible things he did. And then the emperor just breaks down and reveals who he is.
Wow. What a moment.
I know. The son hugs him. The princess overhears everything. And then the son starts talking about the lost letter, how much it meant to him.
The letter from the princess.
The letter from the princess. The next day, she finds it.
She finds it.
She finds it.
Yeah.
But she doesn't tell him it's hers. She just gives it to him.
Why not?
She knows it's been so long, so much has happened. She doesn't want to overwhelm him.
That's thoughtful of her.
It is. He's overjoyed when he gets the letter, but he's also confused. He thinks, why do I need this letter if she's probably married to a king by now?
He still can't believe it could work out.
Right. And then the princess, still in disguise, she tells him to go find her, to go marry her. She says she'll go with him, and they'll share whatever fortune they find.
Still not revealing who she is.
Still not revealing who she is. And he agrees. He thinks she's just this wise person who's going to help him.
And I can't believe this.
I know. So they all set sail together. The princess, the merchant's son, and the former emperor.
Back to the capital.
Back to the capital. When they arrive, the princess sends word to the empress that someone has news of her daughter.
Clever.
Very clever. She goes to her mother and tells her the whole story, and then reveals that she is her daughter, and the merchant's son is right there.
Wow.
I know, right? But she says she has one condition.
A condition.
Her father has to be reinstated as emperor.
That's a tough one.
It is. The empress is still angry with him, but eventually she agrees. They go looking for him, and the princess reveals that he's already there.
So it all works out in the end.
It does. They have a big wedding celebration. The princess and the merchant's son get married. The emperor's back on the throne. Everyone is happy.
It's a happy ending, but it wasn't easy.
Not at all. And, the story ends with some reflections. The emperor, he never really regains his former glory. But the merchant, he becomes super respected. Everyone sees him as this great man, the father of the emperor.
It's like all the good he did came back to him.
Exactly. So what do you think? What's the main takeaway from this story?
Well, it makes you think about fate, about how interconnected our lives are. You have these dreams, these seemingly random events, but they all lead to this incredible resolution.
And the characters, they make choices, good and bad, and those choices have consequences.
Exactly. It's like this intricate dance between fate and free will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really makes you appreciate the power of stories, how they can teach us about ourselves and the world around us.
And what about that phrase the princess kept using? But you have not passed through the waters?
Right. Now that we know the whole story, what do you think it means?
I think it represents a kind of shared experience, a test of character. Only someone who had gone through those same trials, who understood the true meaning of those hiding places, could be worthy of her.
That's a really interesting interpretation. It adds another layer to the story.
For sure. It shows how much depth there is to this tale.
Well, that was quite a journey. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into telepanery.
It's a story that stays with you.
It really does. We hope you enjoyed exploring its twists and turns with us.
And that it gave you something to think about.
Absolutely. Until next time.